maths is the only subject where there is any levels. So when I talked about all subjects being equivalent, they are. There's no advantage, in any way in the system for doing one subject over another. They're all worth the same amount. It's just how well you do in them that's important. The exception to that is maths. It has 4 levels in it. The top 2 are almost equivalent, but the others, they're based on the demand of the mathematics in those courses. So we can genuinely say the higher the level, the harder the maths. And I'm sure you appreciate that. So when they're meshed together, we do have to have a system for how do we put them all on a common scale at the end. Because again, they're treated as a group, not individual subjects. You don't just get a score for maths apps and maths methods and specialist maths. You get a score for maths. And so there has to be a way to bring all those results that you get in your individual classes into the one group. And that's what I'm going to try and explain to you today. So the first thing we've got to do is you do assessment in your classes, and you're probably doing 3 assessment tasks, and you get the results back from that. And that gives you a score at the end of semester and a Z score at the end of the semester. And that Z score relates to your performance in the group that you're in. So whether it's methods or specialist methods. Okay, so you get a score and a Z score. The score in many ways is irrelevant. Now, I know it's not when you're getting numbers, but when we work through how the scaling works, it is your Z score that is important for the rest of the processes. It is how well you're performing in the group you're sitting in that is used to create the numbers that you get at the end. So the first thing we've got to do is get your numbers that you get in your classes from the assessment tasks you do and the Z scores that you achieve from that. And we've got to get them onto a common scale so that all the maths classes, all the levels are together. Once we've got them on the common scale, then we scale the whole lot, just like we did with every other subject I talked about in the other presentation. So in that sense, it's the same but different. So how do we decide, how do we get those different levels coming together? One of the ways we measure is we're measuring the strength of the individuals who are in those groups right now. It's not how the groups did last year or how the groups will do next year. It's based on you and your results in certain tests that let us know how strong the different groups are. One of the things we use is the common meshing test that you did at the start of year 11. So you all did a multiple choice test. You may or may not have got the results, I don't know. It didn't count towards your score in any way directly, but what it does is give us an indication that out of everyone who got out of a score out of 50, what did the methods group get, what did the specialist group get, what did the apps group get, and that tells us something about how strong the different groups are. The other information we might be looking at is your results in other courses, particularly the more sciencey courses. Your NAP plan numeracy results actually do have a strong reflection in your final AST results. So we can take those into account. AST trial that you did in moderation day 1, there was a quantitative component to that. We can look at that again to look at how strong was the methods group and the apps group and the methods group in that. And importantly, we still have an important one of teacher professional judgment. Once we get to the end point, which I'll show you, the teachers still look at it and go, does that make sense? And then we can fine tune around the edges. Is it sort of tracking so far? So this is an example of what might have been achieved on that original meshing test that you did. That the mean, and we calculate the mean and the standard deviation of your results in each of those tests. So it was the same test that everyone did. And if everyone's picked the right levels of math, it's not surprising or unexpected that specialist maths students would achieve a higher score than students in methods. And on average, not the top person, on average, the methods group is stronger than the apps group. And that's data, and that's the sort of trend we would absolutely expect if everyone's choosing the right levels. And then there's a standard deviation around that. How spread out were you in your groups around that result? So we take that information and then we go, well, if you were getting a score of 35, you'd have to ask why you're bothering doing the subject. So those numbers give us this relative strength. They're not the numbers that we use. We actually rescale all of the student scores to hypothetically depend on the overall group, like 63-14. That's like we do for all the other subjects. It's around that 60, somewhere between 60 and low 70s is pretty typical for the mean and standard deviation of any group in the ACT. So if, for my example, we're going to rescale all of those groups to a mean for the whole lot of 63-14, that means the numbers that we initially got from the raw test are now going to be 56, 64 and 70. So the mean of the students in specialist might be 70, methods might be 64, apps might be 56. And remember, don't get caught up with the mean. I said it's your Z-score that's really important. If your Z-score is 2 above the mean, you could be doing methods, and what would your top score be? How do we work that out? Your Z-score is 2. What does that mean?
Times the standard deviation by 2, and add it onto your mean.
Correct. So double the standard deviation, 24, add it to the mean, 88.4. So that's a pretty decent score. Remembering getting 93 is get you a 99-meter. So an 88 is pretty good. And of course your Z-score might be higher if you're right at the top of the group. So we actually create means and standard deviations for each of the groups that you're in based on your results. This is an example of how it might look in a spreadsheet at the end of a semester. That we just dump the data in straight out of the teacher's mark books. Here's my hypothetical example with 3 students in specialist methods, 4 in specialist, and some methods kids, and obviously the spreadsheet will be much bigger. There's a raw score there, and you can see it relates to the particular subject because the specialist kids got a 2, which is more than what the specialist methods did. But you see there's a specialist student's got a 59, and then methods kids. They've each got a raw Z-score based on the particular group that they're in. When it goes through that process of being rescaled onto a common scale for maths, that's what that green column is. So everyone's rescaled based on those parameters I was talking about. And then there's a final ranking then based on, you might have been top of methods, but where did you rank in all of maths? And in this example, that top methods kid has actually come in number 5 in the whole of the sample that I've got there. So we've got the level, we've got the teacher-generated assessment data, we've got your scores rescaled onto a common scale. All of that happens at the end of the semester when all your raw data is in. Then we do the rescaling for the groups, and then we bring them together. Now, this is a spreadsheet I actually use. It's not real data as such. But again, there's the first column is showing the raw score, like what the student generated in their classwork or class assessment. It is a Z-weighted Z-score score, and I can talk to you about that later if you want to go through that. The Z-score that the students are achieving, their SCARD score in the middle, their rank, and then I said then there's the final step where we rescale the whole lot to meet the parameter. And through this whole process, the 78 is something you'll never be able to calculate by yourself if you're the top specialist methods kid there. just because you don't have access to all of the scaling parameters for all the groups, working through the Z scores, etc., etc. You will know if you're the top of a group, and you will know your Z score in the group. But you can see, in spite of all that, you can see that the specialist method student at the top, we were calculating from a 78 to start with, they've actually ended up with 102. So one thing it is, I'm trying to make the process a little bit transparent to you. I'm trying to make it a lot transparent, but I appreciate it might be only a little bit transparent. But I also want you to appreciate that in maths, it's the only subject you can't predict what that score is going to be overly because of the steps that we have to go through to get to the end point. But you can get very high scores in maths because of the way the levels have to come together, even if you don't think you've got great scores along the way. That's not. So, what can we take from this? If you were at my other talk, you would have heard me talking about racehorses. You know, it wouldn't be great if we all raced together and we all had the same ability and we didn't have to compete. But in tertiary studies, there's a competition. And some people are our racehorses. They just sprint ahead and get to the end above everyone else. And so I put some arrows in there to show our racehorses. So we've got our top specialist methods, our top specialist, our top methods kid doing exceptionally well. We've also got our top apps kid. Let's not forget about them. And so they're a racehorse. If you look at the different colours, it represents the different levels. So that sort of yellow colour shows that that top apps kid is doing really well for being in that level of maths. Similarly, we also had our ponies. Do you remember the analogy of the pony? And Miss Amara identified herself as a pony if we were doing PE subjects. So some of us, under certain circumstances, are ponies. And our ponies here, that student at the bottom of specialist maths, they're a pony in the specialist maths group. They're still in the top half of kids doing maths, but you're not doing as well as the other students in specialist. That student might think they're enjoying their maths, they're not overly exerting themselves as far as homework goes, and they're perfectly satisfied to be sitting in the middle of the group. Then they stay in specialist. But they might look at that and go, and you will know where you rank at the end of semester. That pony might look at that and go, I worked really hard and I'm spending 4 times more studying for maths than I do for every other subject, and it's out of proportion to the rest of my life. That student might be better thinking about a move to methods because they're already in the middle of a methods group, and if they can grasp the concepts easier, they might actually climb the rankings. So you might actually be able to drop the level and actually get a higher ranking and a higher final score. You can't decide any of that now. You need to wait to the end of the semester and see what your results actually are. Where do you fit in this horse race? And similarly, those 3 students at the bottom there of the methods group, those scores aren't particularly great. They're right down the bottom of the apps group. I would be counselling those 3 ponies that apps would be a better level of maths for them. And again, they could climb the rankings if they're not being as challenged as much by the work. We've got a pony there in apps in this hypothetical, but their score's 31. The BSSS actually don't issue any ATARs below 30, only between 30 and 99.95. They actually reserve that 0 to 30 in their statistical thinking. They're put aside for accredited students. Now, you know that accredited students don't get ATARs, but they're going, well, if the students who did accredited did tertiary, their ATARs would be the 0 to 30 group. Everyone who does tertiary is going to get at least 30 onward. If in this course you were getting a score in the low 40s, 30s, you'd have to be asking, is that the right course and are you in the right package potentially? So I would definitely be counselling that bottom pony to change package or drop maths. Okay, so the advice comes at the end of the semester once you know where your ranking is compared to everyone else. What can you take from this? You can only do what you can control, which is your effort and application and how much advice you ask for and help you get when you don't understand things. So you're always aiming for your own PB. That's in your control. Don't stick with a level of maths because you think it'll magically scale you up. Just like choosing another subject, it's not going to scale you up. You can be a pony and you can be left way behind, working super hard or perhaps being really lazy in a high level of maths. You're going to be right down the bottom. You're not going to get scaled up. You're going to get a really dreadful looking score. So don't think doing a higher level is magically going to make your score better. Choose the level or stay in the level that you work best in. And just a final, if there's an assessment task that's not done well by many students in any particular level, that can be a sign of student learning. Did the cohort not understand the concepts? It could be that there's a gap in other fundamental skills from earlier year levels that shine through, because senior maths keeps building. We can't keep going back to your 10, 9, 8 maths to teach you skills again. You're expected to know them and apply them, and new knowledge is added on top. So student learning can be an issue, but also assessment design. Sometimes teachers think something's going to work. They think that it's the right style of question for what they're trying to test, and it backfires. Either of those things, if it's affecting everyone in the group, all this scaling is all going to fix it. Okay, so don't overly panic if you think a whole group of students has not performed as well as we would like. There are protections in there. Okay.